I'm very glad to be introducing my great friend, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Adam was appointed NBA Commissioner on February 1st, 2014, following a unanimous vote of the NBA Board of Governors. If he had had a campaign chair, I would have volunteered eagerly for the job, but he didn't need one. Prior to becoming Commissioner, Adam held 5 positions at the NBA, all working directly for former Commissioner David Stern. He had served as NBA Deputy Commissioner and COO, President and COO of NBA Entertainment, Senior VP and COO of NBA Entertainment, NBA Chief of Staff, and Special Assistant to the Commissioner. Adam has helped establish the NBA as one of the world's preeminent sports leagues, as a model for global sports organizations, and as one of the largest providers of sports programming in the world. He has been instrumental in many league accomplishments, including playing a key role in negotiations of the league's last 2 television agreements, the last 3 collective bargaining agreements, the development of the WNBA and the NBA D-League, the partnership with Turner to jointly manage the NBA's digital assets, and the creation of NBA China. He's consistently been named one of the most influential people in sports, and recently recognized by Time Magazine and CNN on their list of global business influentials, which features 20 of the world's leading corporate executives. In addition to serving on the boards of NBA China and the Lustgarten Pancreatic Cancer Foundation, he's a member of the University of Chicago Law School Visiting Committee. He was a federal district court law clerk and practiced law at Cravath. Those of you like me who went to law school know exactly what that means. There's a lot going on in there. I was at Davis Polk. Not quite as much going on here, but it's pretty good. Over the past 11 years that I've been involved as an owner, I've seen the league more than double its revenues and become extraordinarily successful. But more importantly, continue and strengthen our role as a leading force for tolerance, inclusion, respect, and excellence in our evolving society. I personally, and my partners Steve Paliuka and Bob Epstein, personally credit Adam as being one of the very few key people who've made that happen. And I believe he's an outstanding choice to lead us in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Wick and Warren, wherever you are, for that fantastic introduction. And also, it's an honor to be here sitting with Boston sports royalty at my table. Charlie Jacobs, Bob Kraft. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for coming out today. Also want to say hello to my friend Steve Paliuka, Bob Epstein, and Rich Gotham is here as the president of the Celtics. So, and it's also here in Boston, one of the best-known sports towns in the country. And speaking to this Chief Executives Club, it's probably my first formal address as Commissioner of the NBA. And Wick got on my calendar early. You must have known something. I think a few years ago he said, "Hold this date," in 2014. So, I also noted when I came in here today that seeing this as the CEO Club, that only a little more than a month ago I wouldn't have been eligible to be here. So that's pretty cool as well. I realize, other than my friends that I just mentioned, most of you probably know very little about me. So first, let me begin by saying I've been with the NBA for 22 years now. And as Wick pointed out, this is actually my 6th job at the NBA. All of my earlier jobs were some form of being David's assistant, all the way up to deputy commissioner, but there were 5 of them. But I will say I've been a basketball fan my entire life, and I actually loved the game my whole life. Although I wouldn't say as a kid that the game loved me back. I attended Duke University as an undergraduate, not like my friend Steve and his sons to play basketball. I was there for other reasons. But there's a story I wanted to tell. My very first game at Duke University as an undergraduate, I went down to Cameron Indoor Stadium, and it was a preseason game that Duke was playing in. And I was sitting with my new group of friends, and for those of you who know Cameron and Duke, something like the first 10, 15 rows of seats all around the court are given to the students, and that's still the case today. And I was sitting during one of the quarter breaks. They had a fan contest. Little did I know I'd be spending my life running fan contests, but it was an early fan contest back then in 1980 at Duke University. And I was sitting there with my friends, and all of a sudden I heard my name called on the PA system. to walk out in the court and shoot this free throw. And I have to say, at that point in my life, it was probably one of the most shocking things that had ever happened to me, hearing my name called out at Cameron Indoor Stadium. But for the fact that a bunch of kids were sitting next to me who knew who I was, there was no chance I was going to raise my hand and identify myself. But they were all, "It's you, they said your name, go up there, go up there." So I walked up, free throw line, hands shaking. And those of you who play basketball and been on sort of in that court, all of a sudden the ball gets a lot heavier. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, all I have to do is hit something. Backboard, rim, anything. Not the net. It's got to be something solid. I got to hit something. So I will say, thankfully that day, I hit the rim. Actually, it was the front of the rim. I didn't shoot an air ball, though. But I'm sure that I would not be standing here today if I'd shot an air ball. I probably would have never touched a basketball game or come anywhere near the game. So I connect that moment directly to getting this job. My game hasn't improved much since then, but the popularity of the game has grown tremendously over the years. And today, one of the things I'm very fortunate to do as the NBA commissioner, but it's something I've been doing for all my many years at the league, is traveling around the world promoting basketball. And it's fascinating, and for those of you who've done that, whether it's the playgrounds and everywhere from Mumbai to Beijing to Rio, you see kids doing exactly what I did as a kid, and I'm not sure many of you did, and that is trying to recreate the moves they see the great players making. What I really wanted to talk about today, though, is that for all those kids I see around the world playing basketball, and frankly, most of the kids you see in the United States playing basketball, most of them will never, ever get to see an NBA game in person. In fact, hardly any of our fans ever actually attend a game. While we have hundreds of millions of fans around the world, only a minuscule percentage of them will go to a game, and only a select few will ever get that choice courtside seat. I should point out that many of those select few are here today. This is just a statistical aberration, this speech. But one of my goals as commissioner is to use innovation, all the latest technology, to try and capture that courtside experience, which I firmly believe, and with all due respect to the other sports owners in the room, is one of the best tickets in all of sports and maybe for any form of entertainment. So I think a great way to think about both the NBA's progress and potential since that errant free throw at Duke is through what I'm calling a tale of two plays. So let me take you back to Game 6 of the 1981 NBA Finals, Celtics versus Rockets, which coincidentally was my freshman year in college. So the Celtics were up in that series. I'm sure many of you in this room remember it, 3-2. On the court are multiple future Hall of Famers, Tiny Archibald, Moses Malone, the Celtics' Kevin McHale, Calvin Murphy, Robert Parrish. The Celtics roster at that time also included a pretty dynamic second-year pro named, of course, Larry Bird. Except Larry had pretty much been shut down that entire series, averaging 13 points a game, and he now faced a Game 6 on the road in Houston. With just over 10 minutes left in the game, the Celtics held what seemed like a comfortable 17-point lead. But with 4 minutes left, that gap had been closed to 3. And Bob Ryan will attest to this. That's when Larry Bird became known as Larry Legend. In the next 2.5 minutes, Bird hit 3 clutch shots to stop the Rockets' rally and secure what was then the Celtics' 14th NBA title. And by the way, Larry finished that game with 27 points, 13 rebounds, and 5 assists. The Boston players celebrated on the court, and you might guess that Celtics fans across the country were in bars, at their homes, jumping off stools, their couches, etc., and celebrating. But of course, you'd be wrong, because like so many of our NBA games, and even the finals games, back in 1980, that game was shown on tape delay later that night on CBS. So that was the state of the NBA that David Stern inherited when he became commissioner 30 years ago. But now from tape-delayed broadcast to games streamed live on smartphones, it's stunning how far we've all come since Bird's incredible performance to another spectacular finals this past season. So again, I'll set the scene. It's Game 6. The San Antonio Spurs also lead 3-2. And with 28 seconds left in the game, the Spurs are up by 5. And some of you will probably remember those images. I was there at the game in Miami. Heat fans are leaving the building. Never would that happen in Boston, Wick. The Heat narrow the gap to 3, but with 7 seconds remaining, LeBron James misses a game-tying three-pointer. If the Spurs get the rebound, the game is over and the title is theirs. But Chris Bosh pulls down a rebound and feeds it out to, sorry, you know who, Ray Allen in the corner. Ray steps back, launches a shot that shocks the Spurs, takes the game into overtime, and of course, the Heat go on to win that game and win the series. But this time, in contrast to that tape-delayed finals in 1981, Ray's shot was literally a shot seen around the world. It was a critical moment in a 7-game series that nearly 900 million people saw live across the globe. In the minutes following the shot, the NBA's 500 million social media member community went into a frenzy. The excitement over the play spread across the globe in a massive rolling conversation. Twitter and Facebook lit up with fans talking about the shot, and Twitter then set a then record for traffic. The dramatic contrast of those two games tells us all we need to know about how much the world has changed and where things are going. In short, global, mobile, and social. And why is basketball so well positioned for this changing world? For one, it's a sport that's ideal for dense city living where there's space for courts but not fields. Today, 50% of the global population is concentrated in urban areas. By 2050, it's estimated that that number will be 75%. Basketball also has built-in appeal for our increasingly inactive and even obese youth. It's fun, and it's a fast-paced, high-energy sport that showcases speed, skill, and athleticism. It's nonviolent. Sorry. It's team-based. Boys and girls both play it and can either play it with friends or by themselves. And its stars are very relatable in that they are multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural, and multi-talented. Simply put, basketball is the sport of the 21st century. Our league's newest team owner, Vivek Ranadive of the Sacramento Kings, was born in Mumbai, India. He calls the next chapter of the NBA's growth NBA 3.0. The heart of NBA 3.0 is this: more fans in more countries, reached across more platforms, can experience and come to love a game that is more global and more relevant than ever before. That's part of why we are so focused on the power of technology, as I know all sports are, particularly mobile and digital, which is how a majority of our fans will come to view our game in the future. And our fans are increasingly attached to their mobile devices. According to a recent study, 61% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the U.S. sleep with their phones, and they check them, on average, an astonishing 270 times a day. And the CEOs in this room are not far behind. Developing digital platforms for our content makes it possible to meet fans wherever they are and deliver content that they consume whenever they want. And technology can help create that virtual courtside experience, which I talked about earlier. High-quality audio will allow fans to hear what the players and refs are saying, for better or worse. High-definition video from multiple camera angles and unprecedented access to players and coaches will provide court-side-like views of the action. Plus, fans can engage in a real-time conversation with other fans around the world on social media, the equivalent of cheering, yelling, and even booing, just as if you were in the arena. Embracing technology is a crucial aspect of enhancing the NBA experience. But it isn't just about unprecedented reach, it's also about unprecedented understanding. I'm sure big data is transforming your businesses. It's transforming basketball as well. As a league, we're enormously excited about how analytics can help make the intangibles of the sport a little bit more tangible, to enhance our GM's roster decisions, our coaches' strategies, and our fans' appreciations of what they're seeing on the court. Every NBA arena today has 6 specially designed cameras installed in the rafters. This technology, called SportView, allows us to capture, splice, and analyze every moment of every game. It gives us a whole new universe of statistics, not just block shots, but altered shots, shooting percentages on pull-up shots, versus layups, not just rebounds, but rebounding chances. We've democratized all this new information, more than 4.5 quadrillion combinations of statistics, making it all available to our fans on NBA.com using software provided by SAP, coincidentally run by your very last speaker, Bill McDermott. We want anyone from academic researchers here in Boston looking into the concept of the hot hand to casual fans to be able to look at these numbers and glean new insights about the game. Celtics fans benefit enormously because you have early adopters and sophisticated thinkers in the advanced stats movement, led by Wick and Steve, Danny Ainge, a little bit begrudgingly, assistant GM Mike Zarin, and your new coach, Brad Stevens. We're excited about what technology can do for the game and the fan experience. But we haven't lost sight of the fact that one of the easiest ways to make an NBA fan is to get them to actually pick up a basketball and play the game. Over half of our fans played the game at some level before they began watching NBA games. We want to get more kids playing basketball worldwide, whether through our partnership with Yao Ming to provide after-school basketball programs in China, NBA-supported basketball clinics in India, which we're doing with the Reliance Foundation, or our Basketball Without Borders program in Africa. All of these efforts, many of which were launched years and years ago by Commissioner Stern, are already paying off. We started this season with a record 92 international players on our rosters. That's more than 20% of the league, including from the Celtics, 2 of their rookies, Vitor Faverani, Kelly Olynyk from Canada. I think you also have Joel Anthony, who's also from Canada, so that's 3 Celtics right there from international. I mentioned our Indian-born
Wiggins next year, maybe.
I mentioned our Indian-born owner. The owner of the Nets, Mikhail Prokhorov, is Russian. The owner of the Miami Heat, some of you may not know, was born in Tel Aviv. And our 2013 Executive of the Year, Masai Ujiri, who now is with the Raptors, was born and raised in Nigeria. So with all this talk about growing the game outside of the United States, I don't want you to think I've lost sight of the critical work that needs to be done here at home. As commissioner, I will strive to ensure that NBA basketball represents the absolute highest values of the game, values like discipline, respect, teamwork, and leadership, which all start at the sports foundation. That means strengthening youth coaching so that youth basketball doesn't just focus on flash over fundamentals and instead teaches boys and girls to play the game the right way. That also means working to make sure that players who come to the NBA have significant experience against elite competition and are both physically and emotionally prepared for the demands of the NBA season. This in turn means taking a long, hard look at the so-called one-and-done rule and considering increasing the entering age into the NBA to 20. The game of basketball has come a long, long way since the days James Naismith invented it just 90 miles west of here in Springfield. Those games, many of you may not know, were actually played using a soccer ball, which is fitting given that basketball is the sport with the global reach and the global appeal to rival soccer. This sport has had some amazing moments since that time. But I believe the opportunity we have to grow the game and deliver a fan experience as never before is unprecedented, and that we can bring the fans courtside even if they are literally a half a world away. I couldn't be more excited about the future of the NBA, and I'm thrilled to serve as a steward of the game. So thank you all for having me here today. I'm told we're happy to take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
I'm probably one of the few people in this room who can say I used to live in French Lick, Indiana. My question is, we see these players who don't have a great post-life. What is the commission doing to help these players after the game is over to have a continuous life when they're not the center of attention as much?
It's a great question. I know there's similar programs in the NFL and the NHL. It begins the day that they're drafted with a rookie transition program that follows over the course of the summer, where we're teaching the players about life skills, everything from how to manage their money, how to manage their family, how to deal with their friends, how to save money. And then there's a continuing education throughout their careers in the NBA. I'd say they also have a strong union, which is responsible for helping them there too. But there's a lot of horror stories out there, and it's far from perfect. So it's something we're very focused on. In the last round of collective bargaining we had with the players, that WIC, in fact, was very involved in, we talked a lot about those issues, mandatory savings plans and other things. The money leaves the league's hands, but, kept, by, a trusting party from both sides to help them ensure that they have money when their playing careers are over. So that it's ongoing discussions, but it's something I know that all the leagues spend a lot of time on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
What are your three most important issues that you have to deal with, both positive and negative, for the league?
I'd say one of the issues is just the question that the woman just asked. I'd say about player development. It's not just post-career, it's throughout their time in the NBA. It's the case in all sports. You have these young men, many of them, who come from virtually nothing, are in a short amount of time given an enormous amount of wealth and fame, and working with them on how to deal with that. And so that basket of sort of off-the-court issues is what we spend a lot of time on. I'd say also really relevant to just what I talked about, and that is predicting and trying to understand trends in media. I think, it's clear that the younger audience doesn't watch as much television. Increasingly, some of them, they used to talk about cord cutters in the industry. Now they talk about the nevers, people who never even feel a need to have a television. And so much of our business is based on television. And I'd say thirdly, and then trying to understand this phenomenon of social media. I talked a lot about that too. That's something we've really embraced. And I've already, just in the little over a month, I've been commissioner. I've been out to sit with Facebook and Google and YouTube and Twitter, and to try to understand the trends there and how we can use those to build our business. The three things I worry about, I can't tell you. It's a secret. Sorry. Anything else? Yes. All right.
Could you speak a little bit more to the interplay of the NBA and college basketball, in addition to the one-and-done controversy, some of the issues around academics in college, and how the NBA could use its moral force on the college basketball programs.
Yeah, I think historically when we've talked about our minimum age, so it was 18, 2 collective bargaining agreements or so, we raised it to 19, and then we proposed raising it to 20. But historically, college basketball hasn't had a seat at the table for those discussions. So I've gone to Mark Emmert and said, you obviously have a strong vested interest in us raising the age limit, but we need to talk holistically about what it means for these players. Because, for example, when I was a kid, there were players in the NBA, you'd hear such and such played, you'd see him playing for college, but you'd say that you hear the Celtics owned his draft rights and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the case that a player hires an agent and then the player loses his eligibility. That's what happens now in college. I'd also say even the one and done is a bit of a misnomer. What typically happens is, even in the very best programs, the kids have to maintain their eligibility in the first semester and go to classes and do whatever's required. But the second semester becomes all about the tournament. And so, it's a full-time job, in essence, preparing for the tournament, playing those games on the road. And then for the very elite kids, the truly one-and-done kids, they, in essence, leave school at whatever point they lose in the tournament, or if they win the whole thing, that becomes their last day, and then they train full-time for the NBA draft in June. So, I think that maybe the mistake historically is we looked at the issue too narrowly. And first of all, just so it's clear, we, the league, don't have the unilateral authority to raise the age. It has to be collectively bargained with our union, and so they have an important seat at the table. But what we've started talking about already is maybe using this entity, which is called USA Basketball, which oversees our national teams, our Olympic teams, and happens to be run by Jerry Colangelo, who's a former NBA owner. And I've said to Jerry, I think you can play a strong role in bringing all the various constituent pieces together, including youth basketball. As I mentioned, these so-called values of the game, we have to begin with these kids, boys and girls, at a very young age in order to teach them to play the game the right way and to have the fundamentals. And there's clearly self-interest involved from the NBA standpoint, but to your point, I also see a moral obligation, I know our owners do, on behalf of the sport. Anything else? Yes.
Hi, how are you? I've got a question for you. Can you talk a little bit more about the going global and what that means? Are we ever going to see a name change? Is it going to be the International Basketball Association at some point?
Well, we view National Basketball Association very broadly as being international, so I don't think there's any plans to change our name. The question I often get asked is will the NBA have franchises overseas? I'm not so sure. I think the NFL has played several regular season games in London. It may be, in some ways, easier for them with one game a week, to work out the mechanics of playing regular season games, or having a team, I should say. They're playing regular season games now, but actually having a team based in London. I know there's been discussions of that. I think for the NBA, given the density of our schedule, if we were to try to put teams overseas, we'd probably need to have a full division in Europe. I think that would be the one place where arguably, if you think about the distances in air travel from, Portland to Miami, New York, Boston to London, it might be doable. We're not ready for it yet. The infrastructure isn't in place in Europe. It's beginning to be. There's a great arena in London, the O2, which we've played several exhibition and preseason games. That's where the Olympics took place. So we're very focused on that. Right now, to me, it's sort of some of the things I mentioned. We know that if we can get kids bouncing a basketball, playing basketball, they are X times more likely to care about the NBA and be a fan when they grow up. And it's also, I should say, in all of my travels in Russia with Mikhail Prokhorov and all the work we've done in China and this new program we have in India, the governments of these countries are very focused on the sport because their populations, even in third world countries, the kids are increasingly suffering from diabetes, are obese, are inactive, and so they're looking for sports that are simple, that are easy to play, as I said, can be played in urban areas where there just aren't open fields, And especially in China, and Yao Ming has been responsible for this, there's real resonance in terms of the same values I'm talking about. There's a society dedicated to people working collectively. And so a team sport really resonates there in terms of the opportunity. So, right now, again, I think part of it is, a sense of manifest destiny a little bit in terms of the growth of the sport over time. And, digital media is incredible where, an email truly can travel around the world in what seems like a second. We have that opportunity, especially through cell phone technology that's spreading so quickly, to bring our games directly to fans everywhere. Yes?
One thing you did not talk about was gaming.
Gambling?
Online gaming. So one of the big, I have a 15-year-old son. He's not watching the NBA because he's playing. So when you say playing the game, picking up the ball leads to a fan, do you see playing online EA Sports leading to a fan the same way?
I'm sure there's a connection, but for us, it's more important to get those kids to actually play basketball. There's, in terms of those video games, and actually when you said gaming, I wasn't sure if you meant gambling, which was this whole separate area that's one of the three things I didn't want to mention. I would rather, I guess, standing here today, if your son is going to be playing a sports game, I'd rather him being playing the NBA game than the FIFA soccer game or the NHL or the NFL game for that matter. I think those things matter, and then they learn who our players are. We haven't quite figured out how to necessarily convert them then to fans on television because, as I'm sure you know from your son, he's watching increasingly less television and spending more time online. But I think for us, still, the game is at the essence of everything we do. And if we just become another digital sports program, I feel like we're then opening ourselves up purely from a business standpoint to unlimited numbers of competitors, as opposed to what's so unique and special about bouncing a basketball, shooting it into the basket. Yes.
I was very happy to see Jason Collins playing in the Nets. Just wondering whether the league feels that it has equally happy to see that it was sort of a non-event. Just wondering if the league is doing anything to make sure that future players who may have to be gay provide with a similar lack of fanfare.
Yeah, well, so, I'd like to think, and again, so much credit goes to David Stern, that the things we had been doing over the years made it a comfortable environment. And again, not that other leagues aren't doing the same things, but made it a comfortable environment for Jason Collins to feel comfortable, coming out and then, joining an NBA roster. So just as you said, I was thrilled that happened. And I was especially happy that it was done for basketball reasons. Jason Kidd, the coach of the Nets, is a former teammate of Jason Collins. He knew how much he could contribute to the team in the locker room and at practice, and on the floor during games. Several of his Nets teammates had played with him before, and it was really then those players saying, he can really help us. And, the Brooklyn Nets are busy competing for, a spot in this year's playoffs right now, and they've been doing well since he joined the team. I would, say that it's something, I've said this before, I'm proud that this happened in the NBA. I think among all the sports leagues, in all the places in society we've led, this isn't our proudest moment, that in 2014, it's only now that we have an openly gay player playing in the league. So having said that, though, I still recognize it's a huge moment in society, and it's getting a lot of attention. But, I like the fact that, shortly after he joined the team, he became another player. And I talked to him about it, and there haven't been any incidents anywhere. Players have been great, welcoming. Fans have been. So that's the way you'd hope it would be. Yes?
We have a Springfield D-League team here in Massachusetts. It hasn't been quite successful from a member standpoint as we had hoped. How's the whole D-League model going? What's its future?
So many of you may not even have heard of it. So our development league is, from a basketball standpoint, the next best basketball in the world after the NBA. And any NCAA Division I coach would acknowledge that. From a business standpoint, it's a combination of an attempt to run an independent minor league, but also an important training ground not just for basketball players in the league, but for executives as well. From that standpoint, it's going very well. I mean, I think that, in fact, the Knicks announced just Monday of this week that they're going to be launching a new development league team in Westchester County in White Plains, New York, near where I grew up. The Nets are talking about doing something similar out on Long Island. And I think ultimately it requires some adjustments in our collective bargaining agreement, I think, to take it to the next level, where now we don't have that same baseball minor league notion of two-way contracts where unless you're sending your player, the Celtics are sending their player down to the development league team, the rights to those development league teams, even if it's an affiliate of an NBA team, those players are not controlled by that team, so it doesn't afford the proper incentive, I think, for you to develop that player, because you may be developing that player for another team. I think as we move closer to one-to-one relationships, more in what's typical in a baseball minor league system, that those incentives will be aligned. And I think our union understands that as well, and they ultimately see it can lead to more jobs and to this notion of true two-way contracts of players going back and forth. So I have great hope for that development league. I think there's no doubt there's demand for this next level of basketball in the United States and for affordable basketball entertainment. And I think I think our owners feel the same way. It's an important investment in terms of a laboratory to improve the game and a place for executives to train as well.
With the recognized growing importance of social media within the sport, do you foresee a need for the league to put stricter controls onto what the individual players are doing, more than what it's at now in terms of just the team level?
No, I don't think so. Our players understand that when they're involved in social media, we have a set of rules, guidelines, which they live by when they're talking to the media generally, when they're talking to the public, and that they've come to understand that whether they're tweeting or they're posting something on Facebook, that's not really any different than talking to Bob Ryan in terms of, you're distributing your views to the public, and they know they're employees of an organization, just like employees that all of you have, and that they're held to a certain standard. I think it's a fairly liberal one. Part of the standard goes to the times in which it's appropriate for them to be engaged in social media. For example, we have restrictions that when it's media time in the locker room, they shouldn't be competing against the media who's trying to do their job. They can't tweet, as you might imagine, during games and other times. But we've had a couple of minor things, but I think increasingly the players understand the same way they're not going to have somebody put a camera in front of their face and say something ridiculous, that they have their own reputations to be concerned about. We have spent a fair amount of time, I will say, educating them on what it means to participate in social media, to so-called authenticating their accounts, because there's a lot of imposter accounts out there in Twitter and things like that. So we've said, if you're going to do it, we have people at the league office who will work with you, ensure that it's authentically you, and also talk to them about not giving that account over to your friend who's going to do silly things and get you in trouble. So, I mean, it's something we have to monitor, but I don't think you can turn the clock back. It's just part of their lives now and part of my life.
Adam, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to have you here.